Hello and welcome to the Wolf Den Podcast, your home for competitive Digimon TCG discussion and news. I'm your host Nako, joined by my co-host Zenitsu. This week, we will be discussing the announcement of the 2022 Competitive Season Nationals event and our thoughts on what it means for the Digimon TCG. So, to begin, we might as well go over the announcement itself. For those of you that aren't aware, the 2022 North American Finals were announced the other day, and it is in person, which is a different from last year. Obviously, not necessarily a lot of people were expecting that. I know I wasn't. And it'll take place from February 24th through the 26th, 2023, at the LA Convention Center, hosted by CoreTCG, the only acceptable TO, probably. But so they also
As
provided a full list of the people who have currently qualified, obviously with some people to be still added based on not having their numbers registered at this time.
I think just looking at the announcement, uh, the in person definitely came as a shock, but I think as things are starting to normalize per se, it definitely wasn't an unexpected turn of events. Like people have been complaining about online for a while, even though it's nice, easy, accessible, zero travel distance. You just wake up and turn your computer on and you're good to go. Now we switched to their big premiere tournament, what we've been building up to. And the only thing above this is potentially Worlds. I don't think they're going to fly everyone out to Japan. That would be cool if they did. Um, but I think like for at least North America and Canada, this is a pretty big deal because there's a lot of people who qualified, and it's gonna be a pretty expensive trip. Most of the trips that we've already been doing were at convention centers. They were on the east side of North America, and now we get one on the west side, so it's kind of balancing out that way because all of the West Coasters were complaining about traveling to the East all the time. Um, Central might have been a little bit of a better, like actually have a middle ground, but because Core TCG is hosting it, they are literally like a half hour away from the LA Convention Center, so it's just super easy on Core TCG to be able to travel and do what they need to. When I was working with ARG, I would travel all over the place to host all of the Bandai events. So I think Core is just playing it a little bit safe and close to home, which is not a bad thing, especially since Core has been pretty good, at least on the online front, when it comes to TOing.
So, while I think that's mostly true, I think one of the things that you're potentially leaving out there is not just the accessibility as far as being close to home, but just the sheer size required. So last year, I see. I knew there was stuff I was gonna want after we started, but um,
I know there was
there was like
well over
1,100 people
10.
or something like that, maybe 12, like
Yes.
1,200 people that participated, and that's I think people that just participated. Period. I'm not sure exactly how many people qualified and received quote unquote participation prizing for the event, though I know most of them, not most of them, a decent amount of them were only interested in the prizing itself, which I guess separate issue, but the idea that they couldn't either, they didn't care to compete or they just couldn't do that weekend that Nationals happened to be last year, so they just kind of signed up, paid their $30, got their participation prizing sent to them, and almost exclusively profited from the exchange because I think most people received at least $100 worth of material, if not more, which basically just kind of was a cash flow if you sold everything to supplant the cost of competition as far as paying for all of these tournament entries has been. So it's kind of a moot point, I guess, but
Yeah, and the act of travel is going to, I guess, I hate using this word, but I'm going to use it anyway. It's going to cull even more people to,
we'll dissuade.
uh, yeah, to be dissuaded from participating just because, especially me being East Coast, now I'm gonna have to get airfare and I'm gonna have to get hotel, and that's gonna add up on top of still paying for the event itself. We don't know if there's a convention that's it's gonna be attached to. Right now on their website at the convention center, there's nothing currently slated in
I
there.
I don't see that
Not even
happening.
Digimon.
That would be
Yeah.
ridiculous. Something I guess I
So
hadn't considered because this well, so I guess to finish my first point, I kind of rambled in a circle, never finished my point, is just the sheer size. What other convention center besides the LA Convention Center could house, at the moment, um, I have numbers, 109 people qualified from online regionals, 532 qualified from store champs, a total of 641 people currently qualified, and that's
in
without
counting. Yeah.
October or November regionals, potentially more. So, because if this is in February, there may be a set of December regionals, something that was past the cutoff last. I think even November was after the cutoff last year, right?
No, it was two waves last year. It was the summertime and then the fall time, and then there was really nothing for the I think there was like one chance in the winter. Like there was just a weird one off. Um I don't remember 100%, but there still is going to be more chances, and that's going to be more people, because if we already have like what, over 500 people qualified for store levels alone, run that again and that's basically doubling it.
And then
So
another, not necessarily another 16, but there should be another wave of online events happening to at least coincide with the release of BT10. So there will be a decent amount more. Like the fact that we're already over about the halfway point. I don't believe we're halfway through the season so far. There should be more than last year, right? That would just make sense because the competitive season started earlier. People started qualifying far earlier than last year.
yeah, because you also have the people who did well enough last year to just auto qualify this year as well. So they might not even be competing at all this season yet still qualify.
Yeah, so qualification versus attendance is a very difficult thing to speculate. But I mean, even if it's 30 to 40%, which is potentially a high bar, that's we're still talking 600 people potentially attending this in-person tournament, which is just that's a ridiculous number.
Yeah, and I think that is a good number. Don't get me wrong. I love those high numbers because it shows the competitive health of Digimon and the health of the game as a whole. Where it's like, oh, you see all of these other TCGs, and where's all of their competitive scenes? Like I know Flesh and Blood has a pretty decent competitive scene as a newer TCG, but like you get stuff like MetaZoo, and it's just like, what is MetaZoo doing? Absolutely nothing. Why am I even wasting my time playing this game if it isn't even really supporting itself outside of just, hey, buy me? Like with Digimon, there's actually a reason to be playing, and I really like that. And even though like the game is still growing, like again, that's just a good thing. Like imagine next year, it'll be even bigger potentially.
Yeah, assuming that we stay on current pace and current track, and that um, there's no other factors that affect the card game too much. But you mentioned MetaZoo, and I have a joke like the competitive MetaZoo game is just eBay. You buy and sell
It,
cards, and then that's your
it
competition.
I mean, you're not wrong. Like people who think that's a competitive game, like it's funny. I listened to a couple of talks because I still want to remain in the grain scope of the TCG spectrum, and they're trying. They want to try to be competitive, but the game is not designed to be competitive at all, and it's kind of hilarious. It's like, oh, you have to bring like three miscellaneous objects with you, and I'm just like, guys, just stop. Like, just stop.
It sounds
Just
fun. It's like I there was
it's a magic unset trying to be its own thing, and unsets don't do very well after their initial release for a very specific reason. That's because you can't use the cards for anything else, and the novelty of it wears off. And this is just
yeah.
that, but its own game. And I'm just like, it's a fad. It's a fad. It's not a
Um,
real game. It's like Force of Will. It came, it went. People could pretend it's still competitive. It's not.
yeah. There was a representative from a local game store at a convention I went to over the summer, and they had boxes of MetaZoo on their shelf, and I was like, I had never seen one of those in person. I have heard of MetaZoo. I had followed it a little bit as far as, a Kickstarter card game that wants to be a competitive TCG, in 2022 and or 2021, I don't know when it came out. And but the fact that I saw it this year and I physically saw cards for the first time. I think they were selling boxes for maybe like $200 a piece. I don't remember. And I kind of played dumb a little bit, but I was like, "Hey, what is that?" And they're like, "Oh, that's MetaZoo." And the card store owner was very excited to tell me about it and told me that it's a lot like Pokemon in the way that you play it, like you have energies, but instead of there being like they're not Pokemon, they're like uh,
They're
creatures of
cryptids.
cryptids, creatures of myth from you know sayings and old wives' tales and stuff like that, and just all the mechanics and blah blah blah, and how it's the fastest growing card game. And I was like, oh yeah, I'll definitely like go home and look that up and maybe come back and get some. I knew what it was, but I just had never seen any in person, because it's just, I mean, you can only buy them on eBay or through Kickstarter. Like, the hell kind of card game is that?
I mean, they have good marketing, which helps the game a lot compared to Digimon. Like Digimon's marketing has been very lukewarm, but the fact that Digimon has grew to such a state with as little marketing as they have is actually astonishing. Like if they could up their marketing game a little bit more by putting like a little bit of a commercial in the anime if they really wanted to, where it's just like, oh, support the card game. Like that's all they need. And if that plays every single episode, like that's 50 episodes of just free advertising of a whole 5-second blurb
I
that the
mean,
card game exists.
you say that they have poor marketing, but I wouldn't be here if it weren't for a Instagram ad telling me about the like promo zero point zero pack that I signed up for. That was supposedly a uh like auction gift. I'm trying to remember, a sweepstakes. It was supposed to be like a sweepstakes. Like
Yeah, it was a
everyone that
sweepstakes.
I know that signed up got them. Literally, I have four people, four of my friends and I, as a joke, all were like, "Oh my god, we're gonna play the Digimon card game." It's supposed to be like the best meme of 2021, 2020, and we all received the cards in the mail.
Yeah, I mean, like early marketing matters a lot, but I feel like continued marketing also helps.
Oh yeah,
And
obviously.
but this is definitely a good step because like even just hosting these types of events is somewhat marketing. Like
Yeah.
people are going to see like, oh, what's going on at the convention center? Oh, it's a TCG. It's having a big scene, and then they see like 600 people in a room playing, and it's just like, whoa, is this magic? It's like, no, it's Digimon, and it's just
Mm.
like, whoa,
Yeah.
like
Well,
I'm just like picturing it in my head, and I'm just like, wow, just wow.
I think Digimon's already got that like s- subtle aura of they aren't nothing, right? Like they're not Pokemon as far as like brand recognition in the United States, at least. I don't know if they're. I mean, they're probably still not even close to Pokemon in Japan, but
Oh no, no,
people at
Pokemon's
least,
still way
if
bigger.
I were to like just throw the name out there, like a lot of people, especially of our age demographic and younger potentially. I don't know how popular the new shows are with the kiddos, but well, at least, oh yeah, I do remember Digimon. Like, I remember it being worse than Pokemon. That's usually people's answer, at least. Like, it was just worse Pokemon. But, um, yeah, like the fact that you could get that many people in a place and it's buzz. I mean, it'll be local news, it'll be potentially like card game news, like to people who don't give a crap about Digimon specifically, just to say, hey, this brand new card game has now grown enough to have a 600 person 500 person tournament in California for their national event. I mean, even as much as I don't follow Yu-Gi-Oh anymore, I read an article from Channel Fireball about how a an event in, I think it was like Connecticut or Rhode Island, um they like the meta had developed and they were just talking about how ridiculous the card game was. But I read an article about competitive Yu-Gi-Oh in 2022, and I think that means something.
Yeah, I it definitely is gonna drive a lot of buzz, and I hope it's like the good kind of buzz where it's just like, oh wow, Digimon actually has a really good, growing and thriving competitive scene, which is something a lot of card games actually just don't have. And like that's what card game players want. That's like
Yeah,
all we want is just the chance to play, the chance to prove ourselves and to like meet new people, and this is a good outlet for that. And like even though yes, the cost for a lot of people depending on where you live is going to be a little bit on the expensive side, with smart planning there's always ways to make it manageable, and they gave us a lot of heads up, like what, 6 months heads up at least, um to start planning our trip.
yeah. I mean, I think I remember hearing that ideally you want to plan a trip 6 months in advance. No earlier, or it seems like you're so dedicated to a specific window that you're gonna pay extra, and then any closer after the 6 month mark, usually you're paying more and more as it gets closer and closer. It's like that weird window where you could start planning a trip and start scheduling hotels, get plane tickets and stuff like that, and it should be as low as it ever could be.
Yeah, like I mean, it's traveling is usually not going to be the cheapest thing in the world, but like there's ways to make it more affordable on yourself. So I'm going to be trying to meet up with one of my local dudes. Shout outs to Eli. He also has his invite. He's not on the list because I think like he's in that weird pocket of people where their stuff from Gen Con didn't transfer over, because another big YouTuber slash streamer, Max DePera, he's also on that list, and they told him it'll take about like 2 weeks for him to actually be fully on that list if he filled out the hotfix form that they also linked with their big Facebook post slash Twitter or
Yeah,
Twitch, yeah, Twitter
it was on
post.
Facebook. That's where I saw it. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, you went over it, but so the downside, unfortunately, of all this is that yes, we are now at this point pricing people out of competition, competitive Digimon, because either um they can't make the travel, they can't do that time slot, they can't for whatever reason, but like requiring someone to be in a place where qualifying for that place could be significantly cheaper or more local or just online is a little unfortunate, especially if you are someone who planned on competing online and now that you've heard that it's in person, you're just completely unable to participate for whatever reason.
Yeah, and there's still people who are also hoping to get their invite. So like don't plan your trip unless you already know that you have your invite, and we
Yeah.
currently don't know when the next wave of store championships slash regionals is going to be. And again, the closer you get to the date, the more expensive it's going to be. So if you don't have your invite, you are paying a little bit more, um, just because you didn't get it in a timely fashion, which is kind of why I was like happy I got mine in the close of this first season.
Yeah, you were
So
freaking
that way
out.
it put a lot of, yeah, I was freaking out, man. I was freaking out. Um, but now that I have it, I'm definitely a lot more happier that I got it sooner rather than later. I know that's easier said than done. I went to a whole bunch of events just to try to get it. I grinded,
I went
and
to two.
well, aren't you
I got
special?
really
I
lucky.
part
I don't know how many times I could say I got really lucky.
Yeah, I
I didn't
know.
even. I literally lost the first round on one event, and then the second one event I won. So, um, but yeah, that's unfortunate for those. Definitely don't plan a trip if you haven't made it. But also, because I know it's something we've made fun of in the past, as far as like joked about, that we've played against some people in online regionals who have just the worst setups known to man. They're they have a laptop webcam folded down so that they can see the desk. They have to somehow see the screen, so they can't like it's just like the default laptop webcam tilted at like a 45-degree angle, and they're playing on a coffee table in the middle of the room with their dad watching TV behind them Like
Oh, no, 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 on the floor. That's
on
that's
the
the better
floor.
one.
Like these people have qualified to nationals that now have to pony up, plane money and hotel money. And this card game, one of its hallmarks was that how cheap it was to get into. We did a whole episode about it last week, and now, oh yeah, the cheapest card game to get into, but I hope you can afford a, you know, 3 night stay, 4 night stay potentially in Los Angeles so that you can play at nationals.
Which California is not necessarily known for being super cheap. So, yeah, like believe me, I get it. It does suck, but like it's a double-edged sword. At the same time, I'm happy that we're having it, but I wish it was more central. I wish it was a little bit cheaper. But what's done is done, and I'm gonna try my darndest to be able to plan my trip and get out there so I can compete with everyone since I worked so hard to get this invite. I haven't traveled a whole lot. I had some opportunities to travel, but I chose not to because timing inconvenience didn't work out. Planned it too late. What be it? So I'm happy that they announced it when they did, and now we could actually start planning, hopefully, for what the expected meta is going to be. So there's been a little bit of a hot debate if this is going to be EX3 meta or BT 11 meta, just because BT 11 right now is slated for February 17th as its launch week, which is only 1 week before the event. So it's not uncommon or unheard of, but it is interesting on how close it is. So would we be going into that event with a fresh new meta, or would we be continuing with EX3 because that's just what we've been playing and what some people might have easier access at?
What do you think we'll be playing?
Based on the trends, I think it's gonna be BT11. And I kind of hope it is BT11 just because it I think BT11, the stuff that we've been seeing spoiler wise seem really interesting. But some of the stuff isn't really like ground shaking. It doesn't feel like there's a huge jump in power scope
Hey,
compared to other
you
sets.
leave my hand interaction alone.
No, like that's what I'm saying. Like I want you to have that.
Well, that's what I'm
I
saying. But
want
you're
it.
saying it's not ground shaking. Like the first instances of inter-turn interaction in the card game isn't ground
Uh
shattering.
Well, I mean, like, obviously, you're going to have whatever the thing is pushed that they're pushing going to be extra powerful.
Hmm.
Because, like, you look at Bagra Army in BT10, according to Japanese data, because that's the only thing we have to go on, and it did
Poo
absolutely
poo dog
nothing.
water. Poo poo dog water. That's an official tier ranking. See it in Zenitsu's next tier list video. Poo poo dog water.
Uh, no, it is going to be on the list just because it's something mentionable, but it would be very far down
Well,
on that
I mean,
list.
I don't know. We just haven't seen it at all because it's been in the same boat that a lot of archetypes unfortunately end up with, where their playable set got split between two sets. So you're running with, you know, one arm and one leg. You're not.
I
It's
mean,
a
like,
non-functioning
looking.
deck in BT10.
Yeah, I mean, but and then you look at the inverse, and you're looking at the crossheart stuff, and it's just like, wow, these are good cards that have zero idea on how they're actually going to be implemented. And to be honest, I don't even think that they need to be implemented.
Yeah.
Crosshearts just was kind of set with what it got in BT10, and BT11 adds a couple of new tech and tools that really help the deck, but like nothing where I need to just throw out everything I needed from before and rethink from the ground up like Bagra Army. Where it's just like, oh, now you get your good stuff to center the deck around. Like Shout 4 is still going to be the center point of the deck for Crosshearts. Like Shout what 7 isn't like that card would be lucky to see play.
Yeah. So,
But
um,
that's what I'm saying, like, that's why I
we do
kind
have
of am
some
hoping
precedent
it's
though.
BT11.
I also hope it's
Yeah,
BT11.
like, that's why I think it's gonna be BT11 because, like, we have some precedent where we've had tournaments literally week before or even the week of, um, where that's the current format.
So
And yeah.
the only so the precedent there's no precedent for like large competition scale. So EX1 came out 2 weeks before nationals, which is enough time. Like no one was even arguing whether EX1 or debating whether EX1 was going to be legal or not. I mean, I guess they also announced it I think well before that it would be legal. And then everyone scoffed at the fact that there'd be 4 Ice Wall in every deck, but um, that's
Well, they
neither here
also
nor
announced
there.
nationals a lot later last year because it was also online, so there
Well,
was no like
last
cost to
year
do anything.
it was around this time last year that they announced there just would be a nationals. Period.
Oh,
Of some
that is
kind.
true. Yeah,
I
and we were just left hanging all the
yeah,
way up until
they were
what,
like, "Hey,
December,
well
and then they
cuz
announced it.
yeah, prior to this again, like we're talking really early stages of the card game cuz I think the first person to qualify for nationals qualified from a June online event, and it just said that they're going to get a special invite to something that ended up being nationals. But nobody like it was a whole online event that only the winner qualified June of last year, and then that was BT4 still. And then we found like, hey, we're going to do these store champs, and you're going to qualify by winning a store champ or by getting top 16 in an online event to nationals at some point in the near future.
Yep.
So we are, you know, we've progressed well beyond that. But the only other I didn't write it in my show notes, but the we have some precedent for cards coming out before they're competitively legal, or like cards coming out and then being immediately competitively legal in um that tournament that see I really wish I'd written this down, but the um the event at the start of BT8 that didn't have the starter decks legal only because they hadn't gotten them in Canada, but BT8 had just come out. I want to say it was the weekend BT8 technically even came out. Like
Yeah,
cards
it
become
was.
legal on a Friday, tournament is on Saturday. So you've like technically if you pick up your cards on official release day, you never went to any pre-release or anything. You had basically 24 hours or not even. You had 12 hours to yeah, you had 24 hours because the cards came out. But you get your cards, Friday afternoon when you get out of work. You have to then submit a BT8 deck list by Friday evening for Saturday's tournament. So it was still legal, and I don't remember which tournament that was. I'm pretty sure that was a online regional, not a Cup Evo Cup. I'm not sure which it was though, because the Evo Cups are technically like the less competitive variant. Nobody qualifies for nationals off of those.
Yeah, I don't remember myself, but I
Damn.
do remember I participated in that.
I did too. I already had my deck from pre-release mostly, but I also knew that that was a scramble. But if I had a whole week, that's a little bit more forgiving.
Yeah, because I was scrambling to get a starter deck myself on the day of in my area. So I think that event, I was hoping to play Imperial, and I think I just barely did.
Hmm. So, well, you didn't because the starter decks weren't legal. Remember?
Oh, that's right.
You got one,
So I
and
think
then
I
it
was,
wasn't
yeah.
legal
Yeah, I rushed to get one and then found out it wasn't legal. Now yeah.
because
So I think
that's
I ended
why
up going with like blue hybrids instead.
that's what reminded me of it was because it was so close to launch that Canada literally hadn't received their starter decks yet at all, like due to like customs and shipping delays and whatnot. So there were no starter decks in Canada, period. So the starter decks weren't legal, even though they were in my hand. I had a Mastamon deck built, ready to play in that I couldn't use, so I had to play something else. Which is why I think I
Yeah,
played Yellow
so
Hybrid and then fell in love with it.
I guess like if there's any sort of delay, uh then that's kind of the only instance where I'm not expecting BT11 to be legal.
Yeah. So assuming they stick to their schedule, because also that's very far in the future. The fact that we have a BT11 release date in North America is that what just distribution level data basically?
Yeah, it's right now the only way I access that outside of just being in the know
Their Wikipedia
was
has
I
it.
just went to I mean I somebody entered. You could edit Wikipedia. I could edit it to not be the real date. But anywho,
I dare you.
like I always just go to GTS's website because they're one of the two distributors and they actually have that publicly available.
So, yeah, I really hope it's BT11. Um, Only because BT11 does look like it at least introduces more things because the EX sets are always meant to be offsets, right? Like, while there
They're
were
supposed to like their unique thing
they're
and
small
have
sets. I
more
mean,
self-contained. Yeah,
we've
they're supposed to be
basically
a little bit more self-contained.
we've basically fallen into the old Magic cycle of big, big, small in the forms of each block. That's like honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if they have taken some direction from old Magic design, older, because I think they did away with that in 2019, 2020, maybe even
Well,
earlier.
Magic just started ramping up their products, so it's just like, oh, this big big spell doesn't work. Let's just do way more. And I'm just like, okay, cool. I'm leaving. Thanks. I can't afford to buy everything so quickly anymore. And
Well,
people think like Digimon releases quickly. Compared to some other stuff, it really doesn't. Like it seems quick, but it's only quick in the instances when EX sets are introduced because they're small, they're supplementary. They're not like a big core main, even though they are meta playable half the time. Um,
okay, it was core
but like
2019. That's when they stop because they still technically functionally have a three set block, but they don't block them the way that they used to. They used to literally have this is your big set, this is your big set, this is your small set. I don't even know if it was big, big, small, but it might be big, small, big, but um they always had three blocks, three sets in a block, and then the set would always rotate at the end of every block. But they would have a small set, like a supplementary set. Like this isn't gonna have as many cards. This isn't gonna have as many impactful mechanics. It's just supplementing the two big sets we already have, and those are the EX sets at this point.
yeah, which is totally fine. Like there's still lots of interesting things that come from EX sets and EX set design. Um but yeah, BT I'm wholeheartedly expecting BT11, which I think is going to be a really fun meta based on like right now we don't even have any metadata to go off of because
Mm.
they just finished spoiler season in Japan. So now
Is it
everyone's
is
in
it
the
completely done?
speculatory.
Is everything
Yeah, I
actually
think
announced now?
the only thing we don't know or are two of the reprint alt arts, but they're reprints. So one of them we don't know what the alt force is going to look like, and I think there's one other one we don't know what that's going to look like yet either.
Yeah, yep, that's everything. Um,
Yeah, but we did get everything. So now we could start theory crafting and looking at Japanese data, see how they're gonna introduce like what new stuff that set's gonna bring, what's gonna stay relevant, what's gonna fall off, so on and so forth. So we at least get a starting point to like gather that information to try to make our competitive assessments as best as we possibly can.
Especially
But
because looking at current Japanese data, EX3 doesn't seem to be like so it doesn't seem it seems like EX3 obviously did impact the meta, but it seems as though it didn't
most of it
necessarily
was still from BT
well,
11
I
or
I don't
BT
think
10.
I don't think it benefited it in a positive direction. 'Cause I think Bloom Lord Hydra is just kind of a unique outlier in BT your EX3 at the moment. So if that's what we end up with in for our nationals meta, I do expect to just be an obscene amount of people playing Bloom Hydra.
It's like Bloom Hydra and Cross Hearts are the two big decks. Everything else just seems a lot smaller in terms of like its success rate, at least according to the Japanese data. Again, with our format being the way it is, we still don't even have the security promos. So like those are still some big parts to some decks to make them help like function.
Yeah. The the crazy part is so like they only count they keep a running list of large events, which by their measurement is 16 people or larger for a locals, and they keep a running tally of that for the whole set. And right now, 15 toppings with Bloom Lord Hydra, 13 topping with Cross Hearts, and 10 with Blue Flare. So that comprises their tier one uh, meta. They use just raw numbers to determine tiering. So if you're within a percentage of the best deck, you're considered tier one as far as toppings. So the red Gaomon, red based Gaomon is currently the fourth best deck with 7 toppings, is considered tier two at that point, and everything below that. They also got the yellow hybrid restriction, the Tommy restriction, and now I believe the uh Greymon restriction, like fairly
The Doru
recently.
Gray, yeah.
Yeah, Doru Gray
Yeah, the
restriction.
Doru Gray was they
Oh,
just got them,
September
so
1st, right?
yeah, so we don't even know competitively how that will actually long-term impact our environment because like, oh, now we don't have those decks to kind of keep whatever they were checking in check.
Yeah.
So what's
Yellow
it going to
hybrids
end up defaulting
was
to?
yeah, we
Security
have
control?
no clue what BT10 is even going to be like because Yellow hybrid was one of the premier decks of BT10 and now it won't be there. So is it just going to be more cross hearts? Is there something else that people are going to transition to? I have no idea, but it's at least something to consider moving forward.
Right. So like our this is how BT10 is shaping up for us, which again has little impact as far as BT11 because that's still far out. We still don't know like who knows if we're going to get promos that Japan didn't again. We there's still a lot of unknowns um let alone meta impacts.
Yeah. Um as far as the actual decks are concerned, assuming BT11 is included, what are you most excited to play?
Um Call me filthy and terrible of
Just
a
gonna be cross
person.
art still?
It's gonna be cross hearts. I'm
Boo.
sorry. I am an aggro player, so
Boo.
anytime I have a deck where I can just be hyper aggressive, I usually always lean towards that. And if cross hearts is gonna unfortunately kill out my Guru deck because I still would want to play that, um, but because it and some other decks just might kill it out, it's like, okay, I might as well just shift over to Cross Hearts. Like, I played Rookie Rush in BT5. I have zero qualms about playing these low to the ground aggro style of decks that also have good control elements.
Yeah. I figured you'd play blue
So,
flare, considering it's blue.
I was, believe me, I was doing my research between Blue Flare for YouTube and Cross Hearts spoke to me way more than Blue Flare. Like Blue Flare is trying to do like
More
the
what blue
blue
hybrid
thing.
did.
Yeah, it's trying to do what like Blue Hybrid did, but I didn't really enjoy Blue Hybrid, and it just doesn't feel as clean because like it has matchups, like a lot more obvious matchups that it can just very easily lose to. And I think that's like the big deterrent where Cross Hearts has a little bit of a better matchup across the board because it just does not care. And Blue Flares does care about like very specific board states and very specific like things that it needs to go right for it. And I'm just like, nope, I'm just gonna play Cross Hearts. It's easier.
Yeah. And there's also uh the staying power of assuming BT11 is the set in which Nationals is played on. Someone can build a deck in BT10 and for the most part outside of some very few cards if very few if any cards change between the start of BT10 and Nationals for you. Even if BT11 does come out, we'll see if they add anything from BT11, but outside of maybe Cross 7, um they'll probably just be running the same deck for 3 sets essentially, which will give you a lot of matchup knowledge, a lot of practice, and that's something I would look for when picking a deck, projecting it that far in the future as we are now.
Yeah, because usually the way I always like to describe metas is two factors. One, I'm a firm believer that a meta will always start with aggro and end with aggro. Um, and then I'm also a believer in like if you're comfortable and familiar with your deck, even if it was last set's deck, you'll still have a better early game performance, like early season performance, just because of that familiarity.
I think I don't really agree with you there. As far as decks starting and ending with aggro, I think it is aggro performs better on average early meta because people are still punished for inefficiencies in their deck building. But ideally, given the greater sense of balance in the card game, I believe that a control deck should eke out the aggro as they learn basically like how close to the line can they toe their control tools and how to use those control tools because I feel like that's something I've always just known from Magic where early like White Weenies just comes out the gate rookie rush basically and just does things because I don't care what my opponent's deck is if I just slam rookies and swing rookies and that's my whole game plan. My game plan doesn't change. I don't have to think too much as far as, the complicated interactions involved. And then it's only as my opponent learns to deal with that and okay, now I've survived past turn 3, what do I do? Is where the aggro players start to get better at their job, but I think the control players at least begin to participate in the meta and then really kind of fight back.
My counter argument to that one would be, well, look at D Brigade. Everyone kind of wrote it off for the time being, and then for whatever reason, it being an aggro deck, just started emerging in tournaments, like completely at random, out of nowhere, and took a lot of people by surprise. And it was just like, wait, that deck is competitive. What's it doing? Ah, it's doing the same thing. I just play my cards and go
I
sideways and
I think that has
stick
more to
bodies.
do with the forward-looking nature of the card game than it is people like on the merits of D Brigade itself. So
It could be.
obviously D Brigade is performing well now, so it is an accurate staple in the format at this point. But it also could have been a month ago. Nothing's changed. The reason it wasn't played in the first couple events to the same level it was now is because people wanted to play with the new thing. And D Brigade, while is a very old thing, is also going to be a new thing soon. D Brigade is getting support in the next set, so I think people are just kind of I want to play with this now before I play with the new version of it
I mean,
before it goes away
they're
essentially.
also, yeah, they're also wanting to play with it now just because like
Get
they
practice on
wanted
it
to prep,
early. Yeah.
yeah, get practice on it early and get prepped for the new wave of support when it eventually is going to happen because like according to Japanese data, D Brigades is still pretty okay even in BT10. Like the deck's not going away. And then it gets better in EX3 and then it's probably just going to stay pretty okay in BT11. Like
Well,
it's just there.
okay, so it is EX3 because I'm double checking. No, it is BT10. So yeah, BT10 it gets literal support in the form of um I guess so it's not D Brigade support. I guess I'll it's the Skull Knight support Dark Knight
You're not,
X.
that's a completely different deck at that
Is it
point.
though?
Like you're not, yes it
It
is.
was it wasn't, one set
It
ago.
wasn't because yeah, it wasn't because the Dark Knight stuff was in the waiting room waiting for its support and now it gets its actual support and I just was recording the video for it and you're not even playing any D Brigade cards. Like there's zero reason why you should ever think about playing D Brigades inside of the brand new Dark Knight deck.
Maybe that's wrong. I don't know. But um so yeah, D Brigade obviously has its own merits now, but I think people are more playing it because it's getting support more so than it like I think D Brigade's really good right now. Obviously, as people are doing better with it, it started popping up again, basically in the same vein as D Reaper. Like somebody shows up with D Reaper and we thought it was a fluke and like I completely wrote it off originally and then as it continued to show up, I was like, okay, let me try this out. Let me see how this actually is performing. Let me see why it's doing what it's doing. And I got it once I played it.
Yeah. And sometimes that's all it takes is just somebody putting a magical formula together and just iteration upon what was already successful based on the environment that you're expected to play in. So like just because it was successful for that event doesn't mean you need to play that exact list. You should always think about like figuring out what you um are expected to see. So it's just like, okay, this deck loses to Wereguru. How can I tech against Wereguru versus the initial build, which didn't play against any Wereguru at all. So like that's something you have to keep in mind when at least just copying lists off the internet. Like it's, it's good that it's a resource, but some people use it as a crutch, and that's what helps separate some good players from some bad players is the adaptability in both deck building and the understanding in gameplay.
So just because we do really get to speculate on decks and cards that haven't come out yet too, like so infrequently, but do you really think Cross Arts is going to be that good, even with the induction of all the new Tamer hate in BT11?
That's my big question, and that's kind of like what's going to sway my opinion is just how well Gaiomon and Black War Greymon and that stuff is going to end up doing. I don't think like Crosshearts is super afraid of something like the Dark Knight stuff because there is some Tamer hate in the Dark Knight stuff. Um, but I think like more Gaiomon territory is like actually kind of terrifying because of like just what it can do to your field
I
for
think
very little effort.
not even necessarily like the Dark Knight or the Black War Greymon X deck itself, more so just Hades Force as a card specifically. Well, I guess no, you have
Yeah,
to include the
Hades
Greymon, but Hades Force specifically.
Hades Force is just such a good card. Like I think that card is going to make any red black deck like semi competitive just because it could
I
remove
It's already
tamers.
been pretty so again, dial back, you know,
Well, I'm talking like Ragnalord can now become more competitive because if that's their staple removal card,
well, it's
like
so
heck yeah.
you have to read the card though, because I almost made the same mistake. Main, choose any number of your opponent's Digimon and Tamers whose total play cost adds up to the play cost of one of your Greymon.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so it's a
So
net
it's
only
it's
deck,
more hard lock. Yeah, it's more hard locked.
which potentially is correct, as you know, because you could have
Yeah, because
alluded
if I
to
could use that
in
in like
SecCon,
Hina Dragons, yeah, if I could use that in Hina Dragons, and if I could use that in Ragnalord, like that just makes those decks
but
way
it does
stronger.
mean that so yeah, if you have an X antibody Digimon in play, um, so again, I really get confused on this wording. When you would use this card, if you have a Digimon with X antibody in its Digivolution cards, does it mean literally the card X antibody?
I always replace cards with sources, like when it has the X antibody option as a Digivolution source.
Okay, so yeah, so it could just be like any of the X's. Then reduce this cost by 2, so it costs 5, 7 minus 2, and deletes Digimon and Tamers up to a play cost of a Greymon. Then a
Yeah,
Greymon can
so
attack. So the the benefit to that being, um, so you have potentially Black War Greymon X out, play cost of 13. That's a board wipe. That's a Tamer board wipe. Unheard of.
yeah. And if they have a Digimon on the field, it's also probably going to end up killing their Digimon.
And not even,
If it's a
because
small Digimon.
so I guess I gotta go back a little bit, do a little bit more research as far as uh, cross heart stuff. Their tamers
But like
mostly
I
cost 3, right? Yeah, they all cost
yeah,
3.
most of the tamers cost 3.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Mikey's the most important one. Sorry, not Mikey. Taiki.
Yeah, they finally
He's
decided on using the
yeah. They
Japanese names.
decided. Now I can stop using the English names.
Thank God.
But anyway, Taiki. He is obviously the most important one because he lets you use the sources underneath your tamers as material. So I think like maybe the meta is going to shift to them including Christopher as well. Well, actually, correction. In BT11, they get the
Who's Christopher?
sorry, Kiriha.
Okay, I was gonna say there's no longer a Christopher.
Yeah, so they do have a new tamer that they might adopt in BT11. But it's a four costed tamer, so it's like okay. It's not that much more, and it's still going to be susceptible to the board nuking, which I think is why Gaiomon is going to be more popular in English. Um, Not only just because of his BT11 support that we know he's getting, but because he is one of the few decks that actually has Tamer Hate to try to check cross arts.
Hmm. Yeah, we'll have to see how well that does, but it's something that was at least on my radar as far as if everyone's been playing Cross Hearts for 3 months, a lot of them might just say, well, Cross Hearts got me here, I might as well keep playing Cross Hearts. And then that's where Blackboard Greymon would step in and potentially check that. Um,
I mean, we
or,
would have a little bit of Japanese data to
oh
go
yeah,
off of
we'll
where it's
have,
just like, oh, cross arts fall off hard because of this. And
I
it's just
know.
like,
It's
or the inverse.
like I said, we very rarely get the opportunity, especially since we try only to speak to the English meta, that we technically are speaking to the English meta just for nationals, you know, in February of next year now. So
I mean, it's still really early to tell because there's still just a lot of unknowns. Um, like I stated, we still have yet to get the security promos. We still have no idea when we're getting them. We still are waiting
at that
for
point, I
the
don't know if it
mass.
matters. We've almost
It they
passed
probably don't.
we've
I
passed the
think like they're
potential like window of competitive opportunity for them.
which is unfortunate. I mean, like they're still good, don't get me wrong. It's just yeah, their shelf life is more towards BT9, BT10. And the farther we get away from that, the less they'll actually see like hardcore competitive play, even though they're still pretty good cards. And
Cause
then we also still don't have mass supplies of the um god the Ghost or not the Digimon Survive cards. And even though those weren't anywhere near competitively playable, like except for Labramon, but that's still something. Like
actually, that reminds me. Some we usually just do local news here, but did you see the announcement that in regions outside of Japan but are on the Japanese timetable, uh, they just banned a bunch of the promos that nobody really has access to?
yeah, I saw that and I was just like, even though it doesn't affect us, it's still like that's kind of
They
noteworthy
set a
because
precedent. Yeah.
we've already seen like soft bans on the Survive promos because people don't have easy access to them.
I've never seen one in
Um
person.
Exactly. Neither have I, but a lot of tournaments online, they just said these cards are not legal because a lot of players don't have them. It's just that's just it.
Hmm.
Um, so they still need to figure out their promo game, and Bandai is notorious for their promo game.
Yeah, I'm looking at the security promos again, and honestly, I feel like we're passing their window of, because you're not gonna fit this in crosshearts.
No, none of them are in
Huckmon will
crossarts.
get played in starter deck Jespon. Bluecomon might see some play in
Blue flares.
something. Yeah, just because it draws you two cards. It's pretty good.
Yeah, Blue Command also might see play in Examon.
Uh-huh. I don't see Pulsemon fitting into anything, and I don't.
Pulsemon is definitely more of like a for Grandis card just because they don't really have a solid low end. So it was
Hmm.
like, oh, this is just the best low end
Yeah,
card for them.
we don't care about our rookies at all. So, and then Impmon.
Itmon is for Beelzemon more specifically, which he kind of does need that card to be a lot better. Because I was toying around with building the deck and doing my research for obviously covering him,
Hmm.
um, for YouTube, and I was just like, man, they really just want that promo. That promo's so good. Um, and yeah, that's mainly where that card's gonna go. Just having that extra Impmon, be able to revive an Impmon, so that way you could just easy warp into Beelzemon. Then you have Balmon that could also just do stuff. Like it's a good card.
So I feel like you mentioned it a while ago, and then I forgot to respond to it. But I feel like I'm living in the future somehow. But either like I don't want to like narc on them or anything, but my card store has announced their next two waves. Or I say waves. Next wave, I guess technically, of store champs. So you're saying we haven't had any announcements in the future. I could sign up for 4 more store championships, 2 in October and 2 in November right now.
Um,
So if Bandai haven't
that
announced
might.
those, oops. But my card store
No,
did.
the Bandai has not announced them. I have to actually check. Now that you mention that, I probably should check the app because they might be on the app for as bad as the app is. Um, but there
Because
has been no. Bandai announced that they were a thing, but didn't supply any information
yep,
past the
I have
announcement.
I just because of the restricted nature of only being having 16 and more people wanting to get their invites before the end of the competitive season, um, they literally just have the next couple set of announced already. I think yeah, like the end of October, and they're after BT10 decidedly. I remember looking. So whenever the hell
Well,
BT10
yeah,
comes
because
out,
BT10 comes out mid October, so it comes
it's late
out.
October, early November. Like there's another 3 or 4 weeks where there's going to be like one or
Oh,
two every weekend.
that's where. Okay, so like when I messaged you, that's where I got the dates confused because BT10 comes out on October 14th,
Oh,
which
that
is
makes
why when
sense.
I messaged you when BT11 comes out and I put 14th, that's because I was yeah, that was
hmm
BT10.
So yeah, that makes sense. But um,
Now you have me curious.
yeah, like I said, I literally I always hate having to click on Discord while I'm recording because it sometimes gets rid of the thing. Ooh, we did it. Okay, so now I can look at my local Discord. Um, yeah. Um, yeah. Okay, that's a BT10
I
pre-release.
Yeah,
BT10
on
pre-release.
the app on the app as of right now, I only can see just normal store events. I can't
Yep.
see any store championships just
Yep.
yet.
I have.
So they haven't officially made any announcement. It's not on the app, so you're just lucky that you have that information
Yep. Yeah.
already.
My store.
I mean, granted, stores would know that because they have to apply in
Yeah.
advance.
Yep. Store championship October 24th. Store championship November 6th. Store championship November 5th. Store championship October 23rd. Store championship October 22nd. These are all different places. And that's the last one. So there's 5 of them already, as of right now, announced that I can sign up for. 22nd, 23rd, 24th, November 5th, 6th. So
Well, I mean, that's at least good information because that gives people a time frame on when they're
yeah,
actually
the
happening.
last 2 weeks of October and the first week-ish of November should be the second wave because there aren't any right now. There's like a gap basically in the, where everyone's in the BT10 waiting room at the moment.
Yeah. Um and like it's funny cuz people are like some people complain that like oh Digimon's moving too fast and it's just like well now we're at this lull period and people are bored. So it's just like well what do you want? Do you want the next set to already be out right now just to keep the excitement going or do you want this lull and relaxation period where you could be more experimental? Like I don't know. I like these lulls because I always like being experimental. That's what I do at locals anyway. I don't like care to play hardcore competitive. Um, I just want to have some casual fun, test out some stuff for YouTube and all that jazz. Um, but
I would rather catch up to Japan if it means we have shorter and then move at a Japanese pace using their time frames once we get caught up with them, or at least maybe one set behind them. So yeah, they're currently 2 ahead of us. So if we were to just maybe have a little bit shorter of a BT10 and then have
so
maybe
to
just be
put
decidedly
things
one set behind, I'd be probably fine with.
Yeah, so like in terms of time frames, like to put things into perspective, we're about to be 3 sets behind, and that's already 6 months out. So like it seems like the game is moving fast, but it's moving at a normal pace. It's just when they put EX sets, they always do it super close to a set, and then we have this ginormous lull period after an EX set.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, it's basically
so
like we're counting by halftime. It's like 1 and 2, 3. So instead of having that half step interruption that shakes things up or at least introduces something, there's just a whole pause between 2 and 3.
yeah,
We had
which I'm okay with. Again, uh, but I
eight
know some
EX2,
people just
9, and then now we have a decided pause between 9 and 10. I don't know. It's given me opportunity, especially with my nationals invite secured, to just do other things. You know, come back to Digimon refreshed.
well, so like this is where I made the mistake last year, where I missed the qualification for nationals last year because I was playing in there for fun events rather than trying to tournament grind. So
I want more for
I
fun
don't know.
events. Bring them back. I want
Well,
some Evo Cups to play in.
they might do towards the end of October another DC, like a DC Cup, because that's what I participated in last year instead of trying to participate in store championships. And I ended up top eighting that DC Cup, which I was very shocked at, and very happy about, but it costed me my invite, and I'm just like, that's always been on the back of my mind, but now I don't have to make that decision because now I'm like, oh, I already have my invite. Cool. I'm more willing to play in those Ultimate Cups, DC Cups, the fun stuff that don't really mean anything.
Yeah, I mean, there's still like levels of competition there. Obviously, they're still like
Yeah, like I
competitive
still want
events.
to
It just
express
doesn't
myself
mean anything competitively, unfortunately.
yeah, like I still get competitive practice and get to express myself competitively, but in terms of like working towards a greater goal, which is nationals, now I don't necessarily have to put in that grind for the second half of the season. Um, and I missed out the first time around just because of life events.
Yeah. So I think that's a good opportunity to stop it. Um, Definitely excited, I guess, about nationals. Obviously, Zenitsu and I are both be there. Hopefully, we see some of you guys there. Um, you won't recognize us. I'm the one that looks like a cat. um, but just I think it's a good place to be. That they feel confident enough to run out the LA Convention Center for this event.
I I'm expecting a pretty decent turnout and I'm really excited to go. I haven't gone like touring or vacationing in a very long time, so this is going to be a pretty big step for me. Especially being back in the player side instead of the working side. Um just because I know how hard it is to organize these types of events. And I mean that's why they're making it super close to home is because it's just easier for them.
Yeah,
And the size of it is just convenient, so like it just makes a lot of sense for it to be there, and I'm really excited to see what the outcome is and what future news that we have, because our formats always do play a little bit differently than Japan's, and I'm curious just to see how ours is going to change and what's going to be coming up.
yeah. So with that, we'll close this episode out. Um, this wasn't super expected this week. We had other plans in mind, but then this announcement came out and obviously, just shifted our plans back a week. We're still planning on doing a catch-all episode, either next week or the week after, as far as just, you know, viewer suggestions and stuff like that. So if you guys have any suggestions as far as topics you want us to cover, I know there's like a couple people that keep repeating the same ones just because we still haven't discussed them, and please keep doing so. I apologize we haven't gotten everything yet, but obviously this came up and kind of went over whatever we were going to talk about this week.
Yep, and then we still also are planning our BT9 retrospective, just taking a look at the data and kind of giving our final thoughts and hurrahs to the BT9 format. I think like with the lull in events, we could kind of do that whenever, but usually we want to make it closer towards the actual ends, just in case something ground shaking happens. Even though I think we're pretty comfortable where the meta is, and it actually turned out to be a more enjoyable meta than a lot of people thought. Everyone was thinking all doom and gloom, and people are still thinking doom and gloom for BT10, and I think it's going to be more enjoyable than people give it credit for.
And thank you to everyone out there who plans on playing Cross Hearts for increasing the value of my Altart Death X's that people will have to buy.
Yep, and we probably should have put this at the beginning of the video, but just as a quick reminder, I do stream this over on twitch.tv/Zenitsu. I also upload this on YouTube, and we are also on all of the big major podcast platforms.
Yep, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, the like. So, yep, just search up, Wolf Den Digimon. We should come up. You can go ahead and subscribe to us there. It definitely helps out our numbers as far as having a consistent listening base week to week. So,
Yep,
with that, I will go ahead and close it out. Goodbye.
later.